work that we're going to be covering for today. Page 2. So we're going to take it paragraph by paragraph. And I want you to take notes just like you would always do, that I'm going to be taking notes up here. And use these as your guide when you're writing this next essay, okay? The introduction of your essay, the very first paragraph, should be simple. This is your first idea. It doesn't need to be too complex and needs to hook the reader into your topic. Because your essay is graded holistically, a strong first impression is very important. Don't have to be really wordy. I think the example essay that I showed you before, it was longer than it needs to be. It was still good, but it's longer. This is kind of the key detail here, the hook. Your introduction should contain 3 simple parts. A hook that draws the reader into your topic. Previewing the coming attractions, meaning kind of where you're going. What's kind of the direction of the essay. And then your thesis statement, that is your clear stand on the issue. We talked before about your thesis not being back and forth. You're not giving multiple sides. As she said in the video, you're not addressing all 3 perspectives. You're kind of zeroing in on one of the perspectives and taking your stand with that. There are 3 types of hooks that you can use, ways to grab your reader's attention. The rhetorical question, the anecdote, which is a story, and the quote. I would say, for me, when I read essays, because I've been reading essays going now on 16 years reading essays, this one is probably the one that works the best. The rhetorical question is fine, but it sounds too elementary. Do you struggle with feeling disconnected? Well, I do, and I'm going to write this essay to talk about how to deal with issues or something along those lines. Like, that's what the rhetorical question lends to. It just seems really too basic. The story, the anecdote, it's the most personal. It's the way in which you can connect best. So we're going to put personal. To your reader, to connect an issue that might seem really broad, to bring it down to practical terms. The quote it's fine to use if you read a lot and you know the quote that would be most beneficial. But if you don't and you're using a fake quote or you're using a trite statement that's been so overused that's boring, then the quote's probably not the best way to go. Okay, so that's why I think the anecdote's probably your best way. Which of these 3 works the best in the essay? Okay, here, the writers of the practice, talk about using a fake quote. A fake quote, how they're talking about it is attributing it to your mom or your dad or someone that you know. Don't make it anyone famous. Don't make it a quote that comes from a book. The writers don't know you. They don't know your parents, so they can't gauge whether or not it's something that your parents would have said or could have said. But again, don't make it like a trite or common statement. Let's see, you get more flies with honey than with, whatever it is you would say. Like if you make a statement that has been used and you're like, my mom always says that, and you're like, really? Your mom doesn't say that. Like that's not something that anyone really would say in an average way, then again, don't use it. Okay, so again, it's a strategy, but make it personal. If you're going to use it as something that's close to home. So then, it can't be misquoted. I'll give you a for instance here. So this says the example question, should American high schools be more tolerant of cheating? Here's the question, sample question, that I have to take a stand on this issue first. But I'm going to try to come up with a quote, a general quote that can lead into my position that I'm going to take the stand of, like the side of no. No, we should not be more tolerant of cheating. So how do I do that with my fake quote? I want you to copy this down. Let me turn this a little bit so I can write. Growing up, my mother always told me that cheaters never win. I may not have liked to hear this over and over as a child, but now I realize that she was right. In my example here, I'm not really quoting her specifically. I'm not saying that this is exactly what she said, but this is the quote part. Cheaters never win. The person who's reading this essay doesn't know my mother. Wouldn't know what she said or what she didn't say. May not have even been a specific example, but I can connect this idea to my stand on cheating, and how schools should not be tolerant of cheaters. And I would have to come up with some reasons as to why, but this could be a good hook, a good personal hook that I can connect. That's how I would use the fake quote. Don't make it too specific. All right, turn to the next page. The rest of the introduction paragraph needs to preview the coming attractions. So that should be a few sentences that detail where you're going to go with the body paragraph. And your thesis statement. The best place to put your thesis statement is the last sentence of the introduction, where you have this lead in, you have this introductory material, the hook is already there, and then you lead into your example thesis. So this here is kind of what we call a frame sentence. If essays are not your best, it gives you a way to kind of plug in your details with whatever issue you're addressing. It allows you to state your position in active voice and give 1 to 2 details about it. In the time that you have to write this essay, really, you should only spend your time looking at 2 major details. Don't do the typical 5-paragraph essay with your introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion, because in 40 minutes you might not be able to get the detail that you need in your body paragraph to sufficiently support your thesis. So just pick 2. Take 2 sides of the issue. Although, and then you acknowledge the counter argument. This is kind of a key detail. It's the other side. Although blah, blah, blah might be true, then you state your 2 reasons, demonstrate that and what you're trying to prove. So here's my sample thesis, okay, going back to that cheating issue. This time I'm going to take the opposite stance. So I'm going to be for cheating in this case. Although some would argue actually, I'm still on the same stance. Sorry. I was reading my counter argument. I thought I'd switch sides. Although some would argue that schools should relax their cheating punishment. Schools should not be tolerant of cheating because, so far I have my counter argument, that's here. I started with the counter argument. This is my stand on the issue. Should not be tolerant of cheating because schools must help teach children values and prepare them for life in the workforce. So I'm going to have one body paragraph that talks about schools teaching children values, and a second body paragraph that talks about how those values can then be preparing them for life in the workforce. This is a thesis statement, okay, that is a model for you of what your thesis statement should do. Present the other side, then state your side, taking your stand and your reasons for why. All right, let's look at 4, the con paragraph. This is kind of a typical structure that ACT likes to use. What I always tell students is, if you are more comfortable in the way that you've always written essays, then don't try to change the way that you write to make it more appropriate for ACT. As long as you're writing well, that's really all you need to do to get this score on the ACT. But if you are going to include a con paragraph, it says the ACT graders will be looking for your first body paragraph to acknowledge the other side of the argument. Use this paragraph to acknowledge the counter argument, but then destroy it. Use phrases like although, or words, I guess, to show that the reader that you grasp the entire issue, not just one side. This paragraph should include one example that would help those on the other side of your argument. But this is the problem with the con paragraph. If you don't do it well enough, it can have a way of contradicting your thesis. And you don't want to do this. So if you can't effectively present the other side, while some people may argue this, and then do this part and destroy what the other side is saying, if you can't do that effectively, don't use the con paragraph. Okay, I would kind of advise you to move away from using the con paragraph because it can diminish your argument. pretty heavily. Okay? So, with that, okay, I'm going to skip ahead to 5. Skip ahead to the pro paragraph. Yeah, go ahead. The pro paragraph should be the bulk of your argument. This is where you're giving your specific reasons to prove your thesis. This has to be your key. How do I prove my thesis statement? What are the specific examples that I can give that are convincing enough to prove my argument? Should high schools be tolerant of cheating? What I want you to do is take just a minute, pick a side of this issue. So that's where you're going to state your argument, what side you're on. Give a specific example that would prove your side. And that's kind of where we're going to stop. I'm going to kind of work on the explanations, okay, of broadening it. I'm going to work from your examples. So I'll give you a second. Think, what side of this argument would you be on? What can be a reason that proves your argument? And what example could you use? The pro paragraph. All of your examples were great examples. Okay, I like them. That's what you need to do specifically. Try to focus your attention on the specific examples. And then to get to the conclusion. Again, your conclusion does not have to be very long. Just a few sentences, but you have to have one. The biggest problem that students make with these types of essays is you run out of time and you don't have a conclusion. Okay? You have to have one. Even if it's brief, you have to come to a conclusion somehow. The ideal one summarizes your 2 examples and then relates back to your general topic. So whereas the way that I explain this to students, the best way I can use is this analogy. If you consider this to be your introduction. So your introduction starts broad and gets specific when it gets to the thesis. Your conclusion paragraph does exactly the opposite of that. So this is your conclusion. Starts with the specifics and then goes back to the broad issues of what's the big idea, what's the kind of big umbrella idea issue that your essay has attempted to prove. So you think of your conclusion as the opposite of your introduction. Okay. Some other things to note just briefly, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, is you want to do the best that you can to use correct grammar. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect because it is considered a rough draft, but if you're intentionally writing in a conversational way, if you're writing in fragments or run-on sentences, if you're always miscapitalizing words that you know at this point should be capitalized, that's where your grammar is going to become an issue. If there are a few things that are misspelled, but overall your essay makes sense, then you don't have to worry too much about that. You want to use vocabulary that's comfortable to you. This is kind of an area that some students think, well, if I use really big words, then that can get me a higher score on this essay. But if you don't know what the words mean and you're not using them properly, it doesn't do you any good. So use some terminology, like I would go in with the vocabulary that we've practiced, and I would have a few of those upper level vocabulary words that I know I can use properly. I'm going to kind of have in my head, these are some of the words that I can bump my vocabulary up just a little bit, but not to the point where it's something that doesn't make any sense anymore. Okay, so like this says, I would memorize a few transition devices, a few words that maybe I can include in a way that bumps my essay up just a little bit. I'm going to post this for you the same direction and different direction. These are transition words. Sometimes transitions are the place where students falter the most because they don't include enough transitions, so their writing just sounds really bumpy and really abrupt, moving from one idea to the other. So if you're able to incorporate some of these transitional words, it makes your writing just a little bit better. All right. With all of that, now we are to the final practice that we're going to do for essays for today. I've gypped you just a little bit, as far as once we get into this. You'll still have the 40 minutes, yes, but if you need a little bit of extra time, you can finish this essay once you are at home, but this is where we're going to kind of focus our attention for the rest of class. If you don't have a computer, you want to go get one. Read through the prompt, read it carefully, and then I'll put the timer up here for our conclusion for class for today.